Like any job, being a technology teacher has its pros and cons. For one thing, it has a pretty decent salary compared with jobs across the board, and it has very good benefits. But unfortunately, you don't get paid during the summer, so most people have to either save up throughout the year or figure out some kind of other job to do during the summertime to make sure they can pay the bills. A pro is that you have a reliable work schedule and you know when you're going to have time off. So following the school schedule, you're sure about when you have vacation time. You're sure about what hours you're required to work. You're sure about what days you're required to work. It's very consistent and easy to follow schedule compared with other jobs where you might have periods of time where you're working long shifts, many hours in a week, and then other times where you're not working very much. And if that's how you're being paid, that means that you might have lots of money sometimes and you might have very little and be struggling other times. Being a teacher, you don't have to worry so much about that. The work hours and pay are reliable. But one of the cons is that being a teacher requires a lot of education compared to other jobs. So getting that master's degree, that's a lot of years of education, which translates into money spent and oftentimes student loans that need to be repaid. For other jobs, you may be able to get to the required level of education more quickly. Pros, you generally work in pleasant working conditions. You're going to be indoors most of the time where it's climate controlled. You have heat in the winter. You have air conditioning in the summer. Things are generally kept pretty clean, and you are given what you need in terms of furniture and equipment and supplies for the most part. There's plenty of jobs out there where the working conditions are not nearly as nice. You might, for some jobs you might have to be crawling on your belly underneath floorboards to run wires or to exterminate insects or something like that. And those are just those are working conditions that are just not for everybody. One of the cons is that you don't always get your way. You've got multiple bosses at different levels. You have a department head that is your direct supervisor. You have a building principal who's partially in charge of what you do. You have the school superintendent who makes all the rules that you have to follow, and of course, New York State is the governing body that decides how schools should operate and makes some of the big rules. So you have to follow a lot of other people's rules, which can be a little bit frustrating too. Pros, you get to work with kids, and that can be a lot of fun. For technology teachers, we generally work with middle schoolers or high schoolers, and so some people prefer working with one age group over another. But again, even working with different age groups of kids has got different pros and cons, but working with kids is a fun and rewarding experience. On the other hand, you have to work with kids, and that can be frustrating because there's a lot of different personalities, there's a lot of different levels of maturity and intelligence and other things that you have to juggle and contend with. You have parents that can be difficult. There's a lot of things about working with kids that can sometimes make you grow some gray hairs. Pros, the work that you do as a teacher or as specifically as a technology teacher is important to the long-term success of students and society in general. It's rewarding work to do. You feel good about the work you do, like it matters. On the other hand, your day-to-day work can feel like chores. There's a lot of unpleasant tasks that go with the job, like going to meetings that you don't necessarily want to go to, or grading things that can be very time-consuming and tedious. Having to do things like cleaning up after sloppy students who leave your workshop a mess. These are all things that make the job a little less fun. So the step that you're working on today is pros and cons of the job. You're going to have to, in order to do this, you have to understand what the day-to-day life of this type of worker is. And you may be able to find some different job websites that will tell you some different pros and cons. I want you to try and be as specific with this as you can. Mine was just one slide with a bulleted list of pros and a bulleted list of cons. But I'm hoping that you know enough about what you're talking about that you can explain a little bit more beyond just what's written on the slide.